All right, so we went out and got some exposures on campus. We wanted around 5 exposures. I just used a point and shoot. And because a point and shoot doesn't allow you to do manual or program settings, which can be optimal for this, I used the settings that were for landscape and scenery, which focus on, let's see, optimizing for a stop-down aperture. So the first set here, I'm going to make a little folder for. I'm going to call this my horizontal panoramic, because I shot one that was horizontal, one that was vertical. It consists of 6 photos, shooting left to right. Put them there. And then my vertical, just so I can show you both, but you're only required to do one. I shot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, the goal is to have them overlap by only about 1/3. And even if you're shooting vertically, you still want to have your camera in landscape position, so you have width to your exposures. Okay, I can already see just from the preview that this exposure is darker than the rest. Probably because the sun peeked out from the clouds or something. And because I'm using a point and shoot, it's on automatic settings. So that can be a little problematic, but you'll see how that works out. Okay, now I've got my exposures. I put them into folders on the desktop. Horizontal, vertical. Now I can eject my SD card and put it back in my camera. It's nice to use just a little portable camera for this. You also don't need your camera to be super high resolution for panoramics, because we are tiling multiple exposures together and getting kind of a super high resolution image. Okay, this is how you do it. You open them up in Photoshop in a different way. You don't open them up individually. Instead, you open up Photoshop first, and then you say File, Scripts, Load Files into a stack. I'm showing you just the hand-done way to do it. So I browse, and I find that folder on my desktop of the horizontal panoramic, and then I select all of them, all 6. So instead of opening 6 different files, and I do not want to attempt to automatically align source images. Doesn't mean what you think it means. We will learn how to automate the tiling process in a minute. What it does is it just creates one Photoshop file with all of your exposures in order as different layers, going from the first you took on the top down through them. And this is kind of like a little mini movie, right? Showing how I moved over. And you can see how the light starts to change. It's pretty dark there in my last exposure, because I'm shooting also towards the sun here. The sun was up here. But I've got nice definition to the grass, the colors, the trees. My point and shoot doesn't terribly stop down, so it gets a little blurry back there. My SLR would give me better focus. But by not being so stopped down, by having a slightly more open aperture, it meant that the shutter speed could be faster as well, so the wind didn't make things blurry just by moving. Okay, now how do we go about this? So, from my first exposure here, I have to know if I shot left to right or right to left, and I know I shot left to right, so I need to grow more space over to the right. So I go to Image, Canvas Size, and I'm going to grow it from the left side with space going to the right. And I'm going to make its width basically 4 times whatever this is, which will be more than we need. So let's make it like 150. And I'm also going to increase the height a little bit, just in case my exposure is traveled up or down. So I'm going to make that, let's say, 34. Okay, now I hit Command 0 to fit it all on. And you see there's my first exposure, and then I have all this empty space to build my others. Now it's like tiling a roof. So I want that shingle to show, but I don't want all of it to show. I need to overlap it with another shingle. So what I'm going to do is move this all the way to the bottom. Okay? And then turn off all the other layers except for the next layer. And then I move that to the bottom as well, but on top of the other. And then I use the move tool and I move it over. And you just kind of look at it visually, and you can see the seam of one exposure over the other. You see how the angle changes a little bit on the sky. And what you're going to do is find what you can erase within this overlap zone. So let's find how much is overlapped. And to do that, I take this top layer and I take it down to about 50% opacity. I like having the grid showing so I can see where there is no overlap. And I'll use guides just to show you. So my overlap starts there and goes all the way to there. Now what would be best is I want to cut this tile, cut this shingle at the middle of that overlap. But that can cause problems. So if I look at it, at the middle of the overlap, I'm going right through some man-made structures, right? And it's better to go around man-made structures if possible. And I've got these pesky people in the shot. So I want to go around them too. But that's all looking okay. So I'm going to go kind of through the middle. And then let's see if I can get around this building in the overlap. At least close. Go around some of these man-made objects and wander back down. That's why I love organic stuff. I'm using Command minus to zoom out, Command plus to zoom in, and then I'm swooping around to select all of this area. So basically I'm taking out that whole building. Okay? And then I just hit delete to erase that selection from that layer. Whoops. So delete. Okay, and then I can hit Command D to deselect. And so what I did, just by hand, was I found where the seam works, right? Now what you can see is that that seam is a little uneven from the different cones of vision of those two exposures. You see how the path jogs up there. The building is a little bit in a different position there. So now, that's why man-made objects are hard to seam together. Now I want to use a soft eraser at 100% opacity. And I want to use it sparingly. And I want to transition between the two. Kind of knowing those tricky areas. And yeah, if you go too far, you actually lose content. So knowing that there's some tricky areas I'm not going to be able to fix using this manual method. Because of all the man-made stuff. And that's why you want at least a third of overlap, because you sometimes need to use quite a bit of that overlap to get them to work. Okay, so that's not that pretty, but it seams together okay. Okay, now the next from the top. move that down on top of your other visible ones, and then move it over just visibly. If you want it to lock in place, hold down Shift. Take it down to 50%, find the overlap. And I've got a nice handy zone. And notice, this is going to save a lot of my problem areas, hopefully. I've got this nice overlap here, so I position it using my arrow keys to be nicely lined up on that tree and on this little emergency light. Then I take my lasso, I avoid actually, I can avoid almost all of it. Just make it easy. Go towards the middle of the overlap and then erase away from this edge. Just hit delete, put it back to 100% opacity, and then that one you see seams together much better because I didn't have to cut through a building. And then just soften that transition. Following through with what's needed. So try to avoid big areas. I just don't want to cut into that tree if I can help it. Just leave that as is. And it's kind of fun to play with it and bring out certain aspects from your multiple exposures. Okay. So far so good. That's 3 tiled together. Next one at the top. Turn it on, move it down. And we're going to set it at 50% opacity this time. Let's try it this way. And then move it over. And so immediately from the very start, we're going to find that overlap. And this overlap's a little bit different. I can line it up kind of just at the edge of this brick. Use my arrow keys a little bit. Because I used a tripod, you see how that path connects really well. It's pretty even, okay? I'm gonna cut away. Go on one side of the shadows, cut through the path. Delete that. Put it back to 100% and erase away. Because of the automatic settings, you see how the, I'm erasing too much. You see how the sky is slightly changing color. It also, your exposures will always be a little bit darker at the edges of the frame as well, just because of the placement of the digital sensor. So that's why you need to remove content from the edges. That's why you want at least a third overlap. Start to get to truer color. See, it's amazing how the blue changes as I'm getting nearer and nearer the sun. All right, last one, second to last one, put it at 50%. And this can go very wrong very quickly. Zoom in, line up the middle of the overlap zone, so that emergency call box, emergency light, that will be a nice thing to line up. Going too far. And I'm using the arrow keys to kind of nudge it with the move tool. Okay, and then I use my lasso. I do a rough cut within the mid area here. I delete, take it back up to 100%, use a soft eraser. If I want a really subtle